Hi, Clint Coons here with Anderson Business Advisors, and in this video I'm going to talk about turnkey investing from an asset protection point of view. You know, as an attorney, I work with a lot of real estate investors who are really excited now about the possibility of turnkey investing. I mean, who doesn't like the thought of being able to walk into a deal, it's all set up, there's a tenant in the property, and once you buy the house, you start receiving checks in the mail the very next month. You know, I myself have done this. In fact, I'm doing it right now in Indiana, where I'm buying properties that are turnkey. They're already set up, generating revenue for me from day one. Well, this type of investing is very attractive, especially for those of you who don't necessarily have the time or the inclination to rehab the property yourself, and you don't want to deal with all the issues, or you live in a market where you can't find good properties that cash flow at the levels they do, let's say, in another market such as Indy or Kansas City. So what you're focused on is, I want to buy out of state. I want to pick up these properties that produce a nice, decent, consistent return. Then the question becomes, how do I do it? How do I go about putting those properties in place from an asset protection point of view to ensure that if something does go wrong, because it can't happen. I mean, you buy property, you're buying a liability from the standpoint that if something happens with that individual property and somebody's injured, you're going to be held liable as the owner. So you want to ensure that there's a buffer, there's a break there, that if anything goes wrong, they can't come after me personally and put all of my other investments at risk. So how do we do that? Well, first and foremost, the biggest mistake, number one mistake that I see so many real estate investors make is they group a lot of properties in one LLC. I recently met with an investor who had purchased a lot of property in Kansas City. And this is what they had, is they created an LLC with a local attorney, and they bought properties in this LLC. And what they had was a structure that looked like this: 6 properties in one limited liability company. Now, what's the problem? All right, it's probably pretty obvious, right? For those of you that have worked with LLCs before or have watched any of my other videos or working with Anderson currently, this is not what we recommend, because it takes one mistake on one property and then everything you have there is at risk. So ideally, what you should have is a structure that segments out all of this risk. So you really should have had 6 limited liability companies created. Now, when I go and I tell people that you need to create 6 LLCs or 1 LLC per property, I get some initial reactions. Number one, Clint, the property's only worth $60,000 or $80,000. I don't feel I need an LLC, 1 LLC per property. Well, all right, so you're telling me that $60,000 or $80,000 isn't important to you? I mean, it's important to me. I wouldn't want to lose $60,000 or $80,000 on one lawsuit, so I wouldn't group more than one property in an LLC. I'm often told, or objections are that if I create multiple LLCs, it's going to be expensive. Not so. When you create multiple limited liability companies, your annual cost is just the state filing fee. And if you have these LLCs created in a state with a very minimal filing fee, think of it as maybe $100 a year to maintain this type of protection. Think about this. What type of insurance could you acquire that would protect all of your assets in the event of a lawsuit, that you have complete unlimited protection? It doesn't exist. Or if it does, you have to spend a lot of money. For $100, you can obtain that protection. I'm using 100 as an example for the LLC's annual filing. The third objection I get is, well, that's going to create a lot of additional tax prep work for my CPA. Well, it could be if your CPA created the structure for you, because he's going to set them up potentially as structures that require their tax returns be filed for these LLCs. If you set it up the right way, you don't have to file tax returns for the LLC, so they're completely disregarded. So those objections, although valid for certain types of structures, do not apply when you set it up the Anderson way. And that is, you want to make sure that you minimize the number of returns that have to be filed. You want to make sure that you keep your state fees down at a very low level, depending on where you create these limited liability companies. And you want to make sure you're in control of everything and segregated out all of your liability, so one property can't take down your entire structure. And so when it comes to turnkey investing, what I often recommend people do is actually create a few LLCs in the state where they plan to buy. And this is before you even own the property, because I want to have those LLCs in place ready to take title when that deal comes along. For example, when I started focusing on the indie market, what I did is I went out there and I created several limited liability companies because I knew that I was going to buy a certain amount of real estate in that market. So I had these LLCs all set up, ready to take title to the property. So then when I had the property in hand that I wanted to buy, what I would do is I would give the seller the information for LLC number one. So title then would be taken in LLC number one at closing. LLC number two, same thing. So that was ready to go. So I didn't have to wait, run out there and get an entity filed and anticipate after I've already got the property under contract. It's just so much simpler to have it at the outset. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, Clint, that's all fine and good if you're using cash, but I'm not a cash buyer. I don't want to put $60,000 into one property. I want to leverage because I know I can buy more with leverage. And if I'm using traditional financing, that's going to be a problem for me because there are a lot of lenders out there that will not loan to LLCs. They're going to look at these as residential loans and they're going to require that I close in my own name. Okay, that's fine. I appreciate that. We work with that all the time here at Anderson with investors. It does not negate the necessity to have one LLC per property, of course, but the way you handle that in those types of situations with turnkey properties is we will create land trusts. All right, so you have a land trust set up. So you buy the turnkey property in your own name down here. So I'm buying the turnkey property in my own name. Once I've closed, I move it into my land trust. So this then avoids the due on sale clause and prevents any issues with my lender accelerating my note. Because the land trust doesn't offer any protection for me, that is, if the property itself comes under attack, the tenant brings a claim against the trust, they can sue me personally because I'm the owner of the trust. I want to remove myself from ownership and I want to put it into a structure that offers asset protection. I'll take that land trust and dump it into the LLC. And so many times, several investors will do this. They'll create the land trust to hold the property. Once it's in there, then the land trust will go into the LLC. So you could actually do this 4 ways here. Again, just like this. And having these structures already ready to go makes the process that much simpler to put it all into place. Another benefit of using these land trusts when you're buying turnkey properties is if you've set them up this way, you can use a nominee. I'm a nominee on, I don't know how many trusts to date. I assigned 6 trusts alone today before I sat down to cut this video, or actually stood up to cut the video, where my name appears on record as Clint Coons, trustee of the Purple Frog Trust. Let's say that's what somebody chose for it. And I don't recommend using that. I always like to use a property address. But Clint Coons, trustee of that trust. I then resign my position after the property's titled in the name of the trust and my client steps in. So it protects their actual ownership. That if somebody's doing an asset search, they're not associated with that property. So no one knows that they own it. So those are things you can do as well for turnkey properties to keep your name off of them. So a turnkey, what I typically do is create the LLCs in the state where I plan to buy, and I'll oftentimes create a few extra LLCs, like I showed you here, in anticipation of buying in that particular market, so I have them ready to go. Those LLCs in turn should be owned by a holding company. So your structure should actually, if you're thinking about it, it should have one additional component to it, because you don't want to own these LLCs probably in your own name. What I would do is create them so they're like this. So those are those 4 LLCs, and all 4 of those are owned by this company right here, which is a holding LLC. And this is oftentimes set up in Wyoming or Nevada. So all these are owned 100% down here. And what this gives you is some anonymity for these LLCs so no one knows that you own them. And it also reduces the number of tax returns. And so there's a couple of benefits, strong benefits that come with this particular type of structure. If you watch my video on investment real estate, what is the appropriate structures for that? I have a video that covers this. You'll see that I often recommend you use a holding LLC to own your various LLCs. So a turnkey, well, it's a great way to get into real estate. I myself have bought a number of turnkey properties. But the key is you should have your structure in place in anticipation of taking these deals down so you can close, if you're buying for cash, directly in the LLC name. Or if you're using financing, you've got that land trust set up. Now, one other thing I want to throw at you here that I think is really important is that a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, I mean, several instances I'll see people that'll get involved in turnkey real estate. What they'll use is hard money. So they'll come out there and they'll find a house, and they'll bring in a hard money lender. So they bring in this hard money lender to buy the house, and the house will typically have some appreciation. So they're buying it for, say, 20% under market with the hard money. After they purchase the house, they will in turn then go to and seek out traditional financing to take out the hard money lender. You may have done this before. So in this particular case, this type of structure, you're not going to set up the LLCs right away to take title, because even though the hard money lender might let you take title in the name of the LLC, traditional financing, they're going to want you to pull that property out of the LLC to finance it. And what I would want to see is a bunch of deeds going back and forth, because depending on the county where you're purchasing, it could create a taxable event for you to pull that property out. So what you should do then is take title in your own name when you're using the hard money, with anticipation of seeking traditional financing to take out your hard money lender. So I'll do everything in my own name, get it all cleaned up where I've locked in my financing now with traditional, and I've got that deed or that first deed of trust or mortgage on the property now with traditional financing. And then at that point in time, I'll kick that property up into a land trust. I'll move it into the land trust and then drop that land trust into that limited liability company. If you attempt to go through this ahead of time, before you've done the traditional financing and taken out the hard money lender, you're just going to create problems for yourself, because traditional financing, they're not going to like to see land trust or LLCs in the mix. You can do it afterwards, but don't do it in anticipation of that, because it's just going to create questions and it could tie up your loan and prevent you from getting financing. So Turnkey, great opportunity to buy real estate. Just got to make sure you're creating the appropriate structure for it. Many times, again, as you're doing cash, buy it ahead of time. My name is Clint Coons with Anderson Business Advisors, and this video was about the appropriate structure for turnkey investing.